Yeah, one of the things that Trump talked about that a lot of people probably weren't aware of was the damage that these wind turbines are doing to whales. I wasn't totally aware of it.
I had no idea until I watched your podcast with him.
I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't read about it until after I talked to him. And it's a real problem.
It's a very real problem.
And what a conundrum for people that are so-called environmentalists to think the wind is like the cleanest option when it's not. The turbines don't last. You can't recycle them.
It doesn't work in salt water in particular, which is what most of the world's water is. I think wind is the biggest scam out there. It's total bullshit.
It's also pollution. When I see those gigantic wind tunnels,
they're ugly.
They're gross.
They're ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought this, where were me and my wife? We used to be into road trips before we had a Secret Service detail. And we took a road trip, the good old days, man. We took a road trip through Kansas or Nebraska, or maybe it was Iowa. It was one of the, I mean, we went through all three of those states, but I can't remember where. You just go for miles and miles, and you see nothing but wind turbines. And it's like, this is beautiful American countryside that used to be green, rolling hills, and now you have these disgusting dystopian wind turbines. I'm sorry, they are ugly. I will die on this hill. They're ugly. I don't want them in American society.
And nuclear power plants are actually more efficient, safer. And you don't have the problem, like we think about the problems of nuclear waste. Like they've kind of sorted a lot of those out. They haven't sorted out the problems of getting rid of these turbines.
No, they haven't. Not at all.
I have a buddy of mine who lives in South Texas, and I went to visit him, and you drive down there, and it's like an hour of turbines. They're everywhere. There's so many of them.
I can't stand that.
You just see them as like the sky is turning dark. You see these things just spinning. It just looks gross.
They kill the birds. They apparently kill the whale. They kill a lot of birds.
If you look underneath them, it's like bird graveyards. It's crazy.
It really is.
And it's clean. It's green. It's like we're brainwashed to think that these things somehow or another are beneficial because they're attached to this idea of being environmentally conscious.
Well, and I got the thought behind them, right? I understand why we were trying to turn. That's obviously a source of energy because you have wind blowing through. That's energy that we should capture, but we're just not that good at it with this,
it's
right?
Not very efficient.
Right. Just accept that it was a mistake. It's not that efficient. The political or the environmental costs are pretty significant. You know, solar, I think, is actually a little bit more reasonable because you can get a lot more of the power. They last a little bit longer. They're not nearly as ugly. And you can put them in places where people don't, frankly, want to live that much anyway, like in deserts and things like that.
Well, they do those roofs now. Like Tesla does a solar roof,
yeah,
which
the
is
solar
fantastic.
roofs I think that's a great way, right? That's just empty space. But wind, I think we just should say this was a failed experiment. We're going to stop subsidizing this. And if people want to have a wind turbine, great. But we're not going to build miles and miles of wind turbines anymore, at least not with taxpayer subsidy.
But I just hope people recognize that the trade-off is not worth it. Like, you're getting a little bit of electricity. You're really ruining the landscape. You're ruining the view. You're killing birds. You're messing up whales. And those things don't last that long. And then when you got to get rid of them, you got to put them in a landfill. Like, the whole thing's bananas.
It's totally bananas. And again, we focus on the carbon footprint thing, and we don't talk about the fact that there are these massive environmental hazards. It goes back to the distracted politics versus the real stuff. And we should be talking about the real environmental consequences of wind power.
It's one of those things that, again, is much like a religion where you must stay with the doctrine. You must follow it by the word. Because if you step out of line and say, actually, when you look at these studies, it doesn't really show that the world is warming. It shows that over the last X amount of thousands of years, we're in a gradual cooling period. And that what's really terrifying is global cooling.
Yes.
You know, Randall Carlson, who's an expert in asteroid collisions and the Younger Dryas impact theory, is a fascinating guy. But he says that like the periods in history where we came very close to extinction are like when there's an ice age.
Yes.
Like those are the most terrifying.
That's right.
When there's global warming, you just move to where it's not so warm, and that's what people have done forever.
Well, and you deal with it technologically, right? This is the thing, that the solution to global warming, for however long this warming trend lasts, is to deal with it technologically, right? I mean, if you look at the number of people who die from disasters in the United States, it's going down because we've gotten better at predicting stuff and helping people deal with things. And of course, you still have terrible things like Hurricane Helene, but they are luckily part of a downward trend and people losing their lives from terrible storms. And, you know, if you really think, like, if you really think that carbon, this is another reason why I'm somewhat skeptical of like the carbon obsessives, is if you think that carbon is the most significant thing, the sole focus of American civilization should be to reduce the carbon footprint of the world, then you would be investing in nuclear in a big way. And then when you say that, the environmentalists say, well, you've got all these poison rocks to deal with afterwards. Well, the poison rocks problem is a less significant problem than the carbon problem if you think that we're all going to go extinct in 100 years. So let's deal with the most pressing problem. They're all like, no, 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 no. And their solution is to buy solar panels that are disproportionately made in China, which has the worst carbon footprint and growing of any country in the entire world. They obviously don't believe their own bullshit, which is why I'm somewhat skeptical of what they say.